Well, when recruiting, almost every single coach across America says, I want a player with that dog in him. Well, I want a coach with that dog in him. And luckily for me, I have that. And so do you.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, we are on YouTube as well. So make sure to check us out on the go. Plug us in your car. You can listen and you can also watch on YouTube. My name is Caroline Fenton. You can find me on Twitter at Caroline Fenton1. I appreciate you for being here. And of course, I always appreciate you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. So I did a full breakdown of the new SEC conference structure and the proposed 3 permanent opponents for LSU. You can find that full breakdown, your preferred podcast platform on YouTube, wherever you find Locked On LSU. LSU's proposed permanent opponents, and remember, it's not 100% for sure until all of the school presidents vote to approve the 3 permanent opponents. But the 3 proposed opponents are Ole Miss, Alabama, and Texas A&M. Overall, I'm cool with that. I like that Alabama and LSU is going to be a continued rivalry. I think it should be a continued rivalry. I like that Texas A&M is a rivalry. I know it's something that almost felt forced by the SEC whenever Texas A&M joined the SEC 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. But now it just kind of makes sense. You know, it's organically turned into a rivalry. And Ole Miss, I'll be honest with you, maybe you feel differently. I had some people saying, I'd rather it be Auburn or Florida or Arkansas over Ole Miss. I love Ole Miss. Yes, of course, I'm going to miss playing Florida every year. I'm going to miss playing Auburn every year. But I love that Ole Miss rivalry. I think it is such a blast. And I think the hardest part about the future schedule in the SEC was trying to come up with a fair way to allocate 3 permanent rivals to each participating school. Fair meaning, in so many different ways. Fair meaning in, so there isn't an obvious competitive advantage one way or another. And also fair meaning each school gets at least one rivalry, if not multiple. The way that I've seen it kind of break down, I viewed it like every team gets 2 really good rivalries, really good historical games, and then another one in there that's just kind of thrown in there for the most part. But I think that as long as everybody has at least one rivalry, a true good rivalry that's protected, then great. I think that Auburn is probably the most obvious there. Auburn has Georgia, Alabama, and Vanderbilt. I mean, Auburn's going to be playing where it stands right now, 2 of the best teams in the SEC. And then the SEC probably looked at it and like, look, we're really sorry about that. But Georgia, Auburn, the oldest rivalry in the South, and Auburn, Alabama, the Iron Bowl, those are rivalries that we can't get rid of. So to throw you a bone here, we'll give you Vanderbilt. No disrespect to Vanderbilt. I'm going to pick on Vanderbilt a lot today. I picked on Vanderbilt a lot yesterday. I'm just a hop and a skip from Vanderbilt's campus as we speak. So I apologize to Vanderbilt, but it's just like they're the best example for as close to a guaranteed win as you can get in the SEC. But I thought, that's going to be difficult to find a scenario in which everyone is happy. But I have said, ever since the 3-6 model was proposed, I have said the most obvious 3 rivalries in the SEC are Alabama. The most obvious rivalries, Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. They literally have a song about how much they dislike Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. If you haven't heard it, look it up for yourself. I thought it was obvious. It's so clearly obvious that Alabama has 3 rivals. Not every other school has 3 rivals, especially as clearly as Alabama, but I thought you go ahead, you start with Bama, and then you go from there. You start with Tennessee, Alabama, LSU for Alabama. LSU, Tennessee, and Auburn already have Alabama on the books. All right, great. Let's move on from there. But that didn't make as much sense to somebody else. Somebody else isn't very happy about that, and that person is Nick Saban. Because Nick Saban sat down with Ross Dellinger of SI.com, used to cover LSU. We love Ross Dellinger around these parts. And he basically, for lack of a better word, cried about it. And this isn't going to be a Nick Saban hate session, but that's the reality of what it was. Nick Saban sat down with Ross Dellinger, and he said, "I've been always been an advocate for playing more conference games, but if you play more games, I think you have to get the three fixed opponents right. They're giving us Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU. I don't know how they came to that decision. I have a good feeling, Nick. It's because you literally sing about those three schools and how much you hate them. It's obvious. What other rivalry would you throw in there for Alabama?" And Nick Saban goes on to say, basically in a nutshell, that it's unfair that Alabama is drawing three SEC powerhouses. That it's kind of been understood that the idea would be each school gets two tough opponents and then maybe one bone thrown, just for lack of a better word. And in those three games between Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee, there may not be a very obvious bone thrown kind of game in there. Seeing as though Tennessee has gotten better over the past couple of years under Josh Heupel, seeing as though I can only imagine Auburn's probably going to get better. I don't believe in the Hugh Freeze experiment, but let's just go ahead and give Auburn the benefit of the doubt and say that they will improve under Hugh Freeze. They'll be better at least under Hugh Freeze than they were under Brian Harsin, because I don't know how much they can get that much worse. Here's my thing with Saban. Get over it. Honestly, like I don't have a better phrase or word or sentiment about it. Get over it. You've played those three teams every single year for the past, 30, 40, 50 years? As long as the SEC West has been invented, has existed. And even before that, I mean, Tennessee and Auburn, Tennessee and Alabama, whoa, word vomit right there. Tennessee and Alabama have been playing since the beginning of college football. Alabama and Auburn, geez, I'm having a hard time here, have been playing since like the beginning of time. So they've been playing these teams, and Alabama's been playing these teams for the longest time. What's the change now? What's the difference now? Well, the difference now is you still play those three teams, but you no longer play A&M every year. You no longer play Ole Miss every year, a team that hasn't necessarily not given Alabama trouble over the last 10 years. Let's go back to the Hugh Freeze era at Ole Miss. So my feeling is like, you know what, Nick? Cry about it. Cry about it. You have more trophies and more rings to show for yourself and for your program than any other team in the SEC, than any other team in college football. And now here you stand, only 3 seasons removed, not even, 2 seasons removed from a national title, and you're boohoo crying about how difficult your schedule is going to be moving forward, how much harder it is for you than everybody else. Give me a break, Nick. And I feel like I have every right to criticize Nick Saban for that, because of the response of another SEC coach about the schedule, about the 3-6 model, about getting a pretty difficult hand dealt to them in the 3-game schedule. And I think it's a good coach that you know very well. And I'll get into that coming up next. Before I do that, I want to tell you about Built Bar, because if you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, who's not looking for that? You've got to try Built Bar. So we've gone through the holidays, and I know that my goal at least has been to eat healthier this year. I'm headed to the beach in a couple of weeks, and I don't want to have a body that looks like I've been eating candy bars. So that's why I've been going to Built Bars, because healthy is actually tasty. And I don't have to sacrifice my sweet tooth while also sacrificing my promise to eat right. I mean, they're so delicious. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in delicious flavors like churro and peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond peanut butter brownie is my personal favorite. I love that flavor, but they're also healthy as well. They're only 130 calories with only 4 grams of sugar, plus 17 grams of protein in each bar. It'll keep you full for hours. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, and now you can still totally do that. But now you can go to Walmart and get a 4-bar box of Built Bars with the cookies and cream flavor, double chocolate flavor, or the coconut puffs. So delicious. You can find those in the pharmacy section, or you can go to Sam's Club, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. So delicious, you can thank me later. Well, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything that you need to know about college basketball all in one place. Plus, you can hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So, Nick Saban's comments about the 3-6 model and Alabama's future permanent opponents being Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU, I mean, they caught wildfire. Every other team in the SEC that's a fan of all other 13 teams other than Alabama said, get over it. Alabama fans said, yeah, that's not fair. But Brian Kelly, he said he didn't respond inadvertently to the comments, but let's be real here. He did. He responded basically to Nick Saban's comments. And Brian Kelly came out and said this. I've been in this, aka college football, and this is in his sit down with Heather Dinich of ESPN.com. It's a really interesting read. Heather Dinich does wonderful work covering the college football playoff and college football as a whole. Go give it a read on ESPN.com. But Brian Kelly, in his sit down with Heather Dinich, said, I've been in this for decades, college football, for 3 decades. And no disrespect to any of the other schools that we play outside of the SEC, but they just don't excite me. Watch it, Brian. You play Florida State in just about 6 months. They may be putting that on the locker room. That might be material for moving forward. Brian Kelly has a knack for creating locker room material, doesn't he? But he goes on to say, I want to play the best. I came down here to the SEC because I wanted to play against Alabama. I want to play A&M. I want to play Auburn, the great teams. And in our new scheduling, we get to play Alabama every year, Ole Miss every year, and A&M. And that's really why I came down here. I want to play those games. And I think playing 9 SEC games is great for your schedule. And it prepares you for the opportunity to play for a championship, but also play for the national championship. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. I appreciate him saying that, because that's not me playing Brian Kelly versus Nick Saban. If the roles were reversed and Brian Kelly was whining about the schedule and the opponents that LSU was given, I'd be saying the same thing to Brian Kelly that I said to Nick Saban. Get over it. I mean, these are good games for LSU. These are great opportunities for LSU. And I love hearing that Brian Kelly embraces the competition. Because he's right. I mean, the way that I interpret Brian Kelly's move from Notre Dame to LSU is that he wanted these opportunities like this. I don't think that I was alone in thinking, whenever Brian Kelly made that move, I thought, why? Why are you going to do that? And I think there are many reasons, recruiting being one of them. I think the other reason being he wanted the opportunity to compete in the most difficult conference in college football. That Brian Kelly could have had, a very cushy rest of his career at Notre Dame. Yeah, and I don't want to act like it was all sunshine and roses at Notre Dame with Brian Kelly, because it absolutely was not. But the way that I interpreted Brian Kelly's career at Notre Dame, and maybe you interpret it differently, but I interpreted it as long as Brian Kelly wants to be at Notre Dame, he could have been at Notre Dame. I mean, the number of times that man got that team to the college football playoff, I thought that as long as he wanted to be there, he could have been there. But he decided to come to LSU, where it's not easy, where LSU competes in the most difficult division, in the most difficult conference in all of college football. When you're going up against the best teams in college football every single year. The fact that you are a top 10 team going into the 2023 season, where it stands right now, but you're not alone in the top 10. There's 3 other SEC teams just in the top 7 alone, based off of the ESPN preseason top 25. It's not easy to get through an SEC schedule. And maybe coaches could look at it kind of like maybe Nick Saban is looking at it. Like the 3-6 model opens us up to maybe a little bit more gimmies every single year that we didn't get. And that's probably why Nick Saban is so upset about getting Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU as their permanent opponents, because it's not going to get any easier. Because that's why Alabama schedules, Central, North, South, East, West, Connecticut State every year. And Alabama's not alone in doing that. Every school schedules cupcakes. But it's not going to be easy. It's not. And I enjoy and appreciate the fact that Brian Kelly isn't stepping away from competition, but he's leaning into it. And like I said, it's not going to be easy. Playing Alabama every single year was one of my priorities in this new SEC schedule. I understood that, though. In that being my priority, I understood that some years that could burn LSU. Playing Alabama every year absolutely could burn LSU. A shot at the college football playoff could be on the line every single year in that LSU Alabama game, and maybe LSU might lose some of those games. I fully understood that coming into this. But you tell me, what's the most important thing for you as an LSU fan, a college football fan? It's to win the championship. It's to get to the college football playoff, and it's to win a national championship. That's why Brian Kelly came to LSU. It's to win a national championship. That's what everyone's goal should be going into every single season. And I know expectations get tapered every single year, but I mean, now that we see the success that happened in year one and the expectations have only risen, we're going to get to a point where it's college football playoff or bust. If we're not already there already. I'm not. I don't think it's fair to be in year two, but you understand my point. You tell me, what's more attractive? What's a better resume booster to the college football playoff committee? Is it a win over Alabama, or is it an annual win over Vanderbilt? Told you I was going to pick on Vandy a good bit today. No offense to Vandy. And obviously, those are very extreme examples. Alabama, which has over the last 10 years been the premier team to beat. I understand Georgia's rising up to the ranks, but you understand my point here. They're very extreme examples of Alabama on one side and Vanderbilt on the other side. I get it. But you understand where I'm coming from here, is that playing teams like Alabama every single year makes you a more attractive football team to the college football playoff committee. And to me, in my opinion, if it comes down to splitting hairs between wins and losses, because let's not forget, the same year that the SEC will adopt this 3-6 schedule, the college football playoff will also expand. So there's 12 teams going into the college football playoff. So you can afford a loss here and there. I'm not saying I would expect that. I'm not saying I want that, but I'm saying 1 loss and 2 loss teams are now much more realistic bids for the college football playoff. So if it comes to splitting hairs, you tell me, if LSU and Alabama enter a game ranked 1 and 2, let's say LSU's 2, Alabama 1, just for example's sake. Let's say LSU loses to Alabama by a point. Let's say it's the same scenario that we had this past year, where it comes down to a 2-point conversion in overtime. You tell me what's more attractive to the college football playoff committee. A 1-point loss to a number 1 ranked Alabama, hypothetically speaking, or a win over Vanderbilt, or a win over Missouri, a win over one of the gimmies in the SEC. And I know gimme isn't maybe a fair term, but work with me here. This is good for LSU. And it's good that Brian Kelly is approaching it as such. It's good that Brian Kelly is approaching it as every single week we're preparing our guys to win a championship. Because I don't want to be that team that skates by with an easy schedule. And I say easy schedule. It's just the 3 permanent opponents. You still have 6 other games to play in the SEC. There's no guarantee that those 6 games are all going to be cupcakes. They're not going to all be cupcakes. There's not 6 cupcakes to have in the SEC. But, I mean, I would rather have year in and year out those difficult games, those marquee games to look forward to, and to prepare your football team to ultimately get to the end goal, which is winning a national championship. And I'd rather have my team get exposure like that every single year. I don't want the easy path. Give me the tough games. Give me the big marquee games. Give me the games that are attractive to college game day. Give me the games that are going to attract millions and millions and millions of eyes across the country, whether they're LSU fans or not. Give me that all day long. And give me a coach that walks right into the fire rather than walking away from it. It's not a homer take, honestly. It's just simply how I feel. If Nick Saban said the same words that Brian Kelly said, I'd say, damn, that's what makes the GOAT the GOAT. But GOAT ain't GOAT talking, and that's for certain. But coming up next, LSU did acquire a new player via the transfer portal. We will get into who that is and what kind of role that player can take, coming into the 2022 season. But first, I want to tell you about FanDuel. So the midway point of the NBA season is here and now. It is the perfect time to download FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's exactly why you need to bet with FanDuel. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, it is secure, and it is so easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to the point scores to the threes drained. You can do all sorts of player props. Like if you think LeBron is going to score more than 25 points, or if you think, Marcus Smart is going to have at least 10 plus rebounds, well, you can bet on those things on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And also, FanDuel gives you an opportunity at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So you can combine some of those player props with, say, maybe a money line or a point spread. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/locked on. That's fanduel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so LSU just landed a transfer via the transfer portal. Mason Lunsford has officially announced that he will transfer from Maryland to LSU. So who is Mason Lunsford? He's an offensive tackle coming out of high school. He was a 3-star recruit, landed at Maryland. He started at Maryland for the last 2 years. He has 23 games of experience under his belt, which is huge. And also the other important thing is he has 2 years of eligibility left. Let's go back to what Brian Kelly said when prioritizing transfer portal players. He said, we will if we have to, but we'd really rather not have to get in the one and done kind of cycle that they've been in over the past couple of years. You might get to the point where you just simply have to. Of course, we know with the cornerback position last year, it had to rebuild that entire cornerback room, and then now they're being faced with doing it again. You're at an obvious disadvantage whenever you're starting from square one every single year. So for Mason Lunsford to want to have the experience that he has, 23 games of starting experience, 23 games of experience, not necessarily starting experience, but he is a 2-year starter at Maryland. And also to have 2 years of eligibility left, I think that's huge. Experience and also time within the program. I think that's kind of the best of both worlds there. He visited LSU this past weekend and officially announced his commitment to LSU today. On Tuesday. He was also looked at by Arkansas. I know is another in-conference game team that he was looking at, so chose LSU over in-conference rival Arkansas. So this is what the offensive line room is going to look like with Mason Lunsford. So LSU is returning 5 starters on the offensive line. Of course, you have Will Campbell on the left side. You have Miles Frazier at left guard. Now, he can play either side. Miles Frazier can be one of those, utility, plug-and-play kind of offensive linemen. You have Charles Turner at center. He took over for Garrett Dellinger in the beginning of the season when Garrett Dellinger was having some issues snapping the football. And that center position is so key. Mason Lunsford is going to be one of your interior offensive linemen. He did come in from high school as an offensive tackle, but he played a majority of his time at Maryland at left guard. Now, you can swing him over to right guard. You can swing him into that center position. But that center position is so incredibly important that if Charles Turner and Jaden Daniels have already kind of built that relationship and have built that trust and have built that chemistry, that's not really something that I want to mess with. It's something that he can absolutely tool with throughout spring practice, and they're going to. They should. You should look at all of your options of swinging guys over from here to there, especially when you have utility players, when you have the freedom to be able to do that. But I look at the center position, and if it's not broke, don't fix it, but at least try. At least try it with Mason Lunsford as you go throughout spring ball. You've got Garrett Dellinger at right guard, another one that could kind of plug and play. He can play center. He is much stronger at right guard. You can play at left guard as well. And then, of course, Emory Jones, a right tackle. So you've got those 5 starters returning. You've got Zaylen Hurd, a 5-star recruit coming in from Neville, one of Will Campbell's former high school teammates. At DJ Chester, a 4-star from Georgia. Tyree Adams, a 4-star from St. Augustine, New Orleans. And then, of course, Paul Mubenga, a 3-star from Georgia. So you've got a solid group of freshmen coming in. And let's not forget, Brian Kelly is not anti-starting freshmen. You had 2 freshmen on the outside of the offensive line this past year. Don't tell me that Brian Kelly is anti-starting freshmen. So they absolutely will be in the mix for it as well. But you've got those 5 returners. You've got a handful of guys that came in that are coming back from last year weren't necessarily starters, but you were able to kind of fill them in wherever need be. Remember all of the injuries and the mishaps on the offensive line this past year. And you've also got a solid group of incoming freshmen. Mason Lunsford is only going to add to this depth, and it's only going to add competition for this offensive line group. It's going to add competition for the returning starters. It'll add competition for the returners, not necessarily starters, but just more so depth pieces. And LSU lost a good bit of their depth pieces via the transfer portal in the offseason. So Mason Lunsford brings experience and also Big Ten experience. I can't stress how enamored I am with Big Ten offensive linemen. I covered the Music City Bowl. It was Iowa and Kentucky, and Iowa just won so many of those battles in the trenches. Kentucky didn't have a bad defensive line by any means, but it just seemed like Iowa's offensive line just bullied up on Kentucky's D line, and of course there were opt outs and things like that. So it's not a fair assessment of the teams as a whole. But Big Ten offensive linemen, they're just built different. Mason Lunsford is 6'7", 305 pounds. I mean, the kid is massive. So, I mean, the talent alone, like the build is there. So that'll add some good depth, competition, and experience in that offensive line room that really needs interior offensive line depth. It's exactly what Mason Lunsford brings to this team. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Remember, tomorrow is a Mailbag Wednesday, so get those questions in. You can comment them below on YouTube. You can continue to DM them me on Twitter at Caroline Fenton 1 or at Locked On LSU. You can tweet them at me, however you want to get them at me. I love to answer your questions. I love to read those questions every single week. Make your second listen today our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything that you need to know on and off the court. Plus, you can hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the college basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.